always hate it with the white shirt and the tie and the glasses. I look like I'm from the 50s.
You kind of do. Look
It's
like
the
you're
glasses,
coming from
really, at the end of the day.
I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
And welcome back to the Politics Unplugged podcast edition. And today I'm honored to be joined by the husband-wife lobbyists, not quite lobbying teams since you guys have different companies, but the husband-wife lobbyist folks down at the Capitol, Marcus and Meghaen Dell'Artino. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to say thanks for having me, and that might be the last words I get out.
That's not true. Although you're like an old, expert at this. I'm a podcast virgin.
We're gonna be previewing the legislature, but let's just start talking. You guys are married. Who wins in a lobby off? If you guys are lobbying the same bills, different things, who wins?
Of course, it's my wife.
Me.
What am I, stupid?
It's always me. Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, dude, I live by that rule, and it works out very well for me. I'm not rocking the ship on this one.
We try not to lobby against one another.
Yeah, I would say that'd be kind of
do.
weird. That'd make for weird breakfast conversation.
We spend more time solving problems than we do fighting issues.
And we have 3 kids, Dennis. We don't go home and talk politics. I know everyone thinks that, but we don't.
3 domestic terrorists. Actually 5 now, if you include the dogs.
Do you encourage them not to get into this profession?
I do, although McKinley thinks she's going to be the first female president of the United States. So if you ask her, she'll tell you that.
She's still got a shot.
She does.
It's still open.
She's got a job for me. She's already said that I'm the one who has to look at the paperwork.
Yeah, she doesn't want to do the paperwork.
You're the proofreader.
Yeah, yes. And I told McKinley, as long as you're serving Bud Light, I'll be there.
Oh, jeez.
She didn't have room for me in the White House.
I thought Republicans were banning Bud Light.
Some.
Or is that like?
no, we're back.
Or is that
No,
like
we're
so
back.
like 2022, 23 or something?
Kid Rock's drinking it again. Everybody's back.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which is fine.
Okay, whatever. What would Kid Rock do? Right. That's what you're asking yourself these days.
Yeah. Oh, every day.
I thought it was Snoop Dogg.
He'd be wearing this fashionable Christmas shirt. I'll tell you that. We all know how Dennis feels about Star Wars. I'm just putting this right in his face.
It was a gift from me.
It's a thoughtful
It's
gift
lovely.
from Meghaen.
Oh,
I
good
just have-
comeback.
I have personal, and Colin, chime in too. Back there, I know you have thoughts and some issues.
I
with
love
the
Star Wars, Dennis. What are you talking about?
It's only you, Dennis.
Oh, we put him on an island all by himself. Good work. Good work.
Fine. I'll stand here by myself. Fine. Been here before. All right. So let's hard pivot into the legislative session.
Seriously hard pivot.
Whether we like it or not, it's coming next month. It'll be starting up. What are we going to expect this year? We've seen entire 4 bills that have been pre-filed already. John Kavanaugh is back with his trans bills, his trans student bills. You've already seen J.D. Mesner out in Chandler drop refile a bill from last year, the year before, that got vetoed, dealing with voting and trying to speed up the count. I'm assuming we'll be seeing a lot of that culture stuff and a lot of stuff from elections. Am I right? Am I wrong? What are we going to see?
I think, first of all, you're definitely going to see a lot of elections bills. You're going to see about 90 of the same elections bills, as a matter of fact. Same language, all just having different sponsors. But I think there's going to be a lot of that in this attempt to sort of speed up the count. Mm-hmm. 1. 2, I think you're going to have a lot of water bills. I mean, Representative Griffin's already said publicly that she's got how many? It was double digits.
She had a bunch last year.
Yeah. And so, everybody wants to solve this ag to urban issue. And frankly, I think that there is room to do that if you just let the professionals who actually understand how water law works and practical applications of water policy do their work and bring it to the legislature. I think that there's a solution that could be had there.
I think you'll see stuff on education 1, 2, 3 because that goes away in May, and so trying to continue the education funding. I think housing is going to be a big issue because if you notice from last legislative session, you have some ordinances in Scottsdale that were an attempt to get around a law. You have what's going on out in Chandler with not wanting to approve the veteran and elderly housing. And so I think the legislature is going to come back and look at housing again and how they can tighten up some of those laws.
Yeah, and that Prop 123 could be like the big issue to start the session, just like the spending limit was last year, correct? I mean, for people who are listening, watching, not familiar, Prop 123 was voter-passed initiative a few years back under Doug Ducey, and what it does is it takes a little bit more money out of the state land trust and then uses that to fund education. But that is coming up here relatively soon. In the next couple of year or two, so they're going to have to extend that, or what's that going to look like?
So it expires July 1 of this year, which means if you want to continue it, right, we need to either do a special session.
And what's the cliff we're looking at? What would that do to education if that just went away and wasn't renewed?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, the JLBC and everyone has an understanding that the money that's going right now to education from the trust land goes into it comes out of the general fund. So for education, that would be a net neutral. I think what we're talking about is ways to get more dollars into the classroom, into the schools, and we have proven over the last 10 years that the state trust land, which is supposed to go for education, right, taking a little more out of it doesn't hurt the corpus. And so we can do that and continue to do that and give more money to schools to help educate our kids. And I think for us, we think it's easier to continue that than to let that expire and try to come back and explain to voters. But in order to do that, right, we'd have to have something that got passed by February so you could have a May election, and that's a pretty quick run, right, start.
Yeah. And is there going to be bipartisan support on this? I mean, and I think in the larger framework, I mean, obviously we, all know the three main things that states do is educate, medicate, and incarcerate. And education is the big chunk of this, 40%, 42% of the general fund revenue. So that's a big chunk of what it does. Is there going to be like bipartisan support to get this Prop 123 back to the ballot to extend it?
Well, there has to be from a practical nature. I mean, the Republicans have picked up seats in the Senate, so they're at 17. They're at 33 in the House. So, it's not like the Democrats can move this along all by themselves. So in some context, there probably needs to be some bipartisan nature here on a solution that truly works. If it's just a Republican solution, then you've got to be questioning whether that's going to have enough support moving forward on the ballot.
You can't refer to the ballot, right, in a special election from the legislature, so that they would need the governor to do a special election in May, or even if it was in August or November. If they wanted to do it on their own, Republicans wanted to do it on their own, then you'd be kicking it out to 2026, and I think that's something that nobody really wants.
Yeah, because like you said, that money would stop here in midsummer in July?
July 1st.
Oh, to start the fiscal year, of course, yeah. Yeah, and what else with education do we expect to see? We know that Governor Hobbs last year campaigned on trying to repeal the ESA, the school voucher program. To me, that seems like that's almost impossible to do now because it's been in place for a few years now. What are we going to see regarding that? I'm assuming Republicans are still going to try to expand it as much as they can, if it's even possible to expand it more, because all students are now available for this, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you have universal vouchers in the state, so it doesn't matter what your income level is or what your needs are. You can go to any school of your choice, so there's really no expanding it. I've heard Republicans want to protect it further. It's already protected in statute, so to me that probably means something beyond statute.
The reverse of double secret probation,
And I don't think, there's nothing I don't think is going to happen on any type of ESA reform. There's not the votes there from the Republican caucus, and they control the legislature. So,
what about this possibility of an income cap? Because you can make a reasonable argument to everyday Arizonans, like if you're making $400,000-$500,000 a year, why do you need state money to go to private school? Why can't you pay your kids own way for that?
I mean, I've heard that discussion point before, and it went nowhere in the legislature the last 2 years. Certainly last year for sure. And so I don't see a pathway forward.
It was actually when ESAs was being decided a few years ago. That was actually an idea I threw out. So if you're 90% right of free and reduced lunch, you got 90% of the funding of schools, and it just went down with your income level, and that was thrown out by Republicans. I think the talking point from Republicans is we want kids that are from low income communities to be able to go to better schools. I think really what you've seen is that pretty much everybody was at a private school. Just now it's taking, the ESA, and, it might have grown by 8,000, 10,000 students, but the rest of them are people who are already in private schools.
Yeah, and I've also heard some reports, I don't know how accurate it is, but some of the private schools have been boosted their tuition by about...
No. Oh, that can't be true. I'm shocked.
There's a certain private schools, there's a reason they don't want your kids there.
Somebody may have alleged that would happen prior to ESAs going into
give Marcus
effect.
his flowers.
It wasn't even me.
Marcus wants some recognition right now. To be fair, oh, okay. There you go. He's pointing
He actually
to
gave
his
me
wife.
credit.
Yeah, it was her.
That's great. That's great. And Mark, you brought up elections as something that's going to be going to take take up some time at the legislature. Now, again, I mentioned J.D. Mesnard had introduced a bill. He reintroduced it. It was vetoed a year or 2 years ago to possibly speed up the count. He's reintroduced it this year. I just spoke with Supervisor-elect Mark Stewart, who said that's one of his top at the county. He's going to be down at the legislature lobbying hard for this. People want these votes counted quicker because the longer the vote goes on, voters lose confidence in the system, whether rightly or wrongly. They do. What else could we be seeing from the legislature to speed up this count? And I should also add, too, Mesnard's idea is you stop taking letting people drop off their early ballots at a polling location on the Friday before an election unless you have ID that you provide at the polls with a signature, correct? So basically you're already going through the verification process, so more votes are counted by the time polls close on Tuesday night at 7 p.m.
That was a pretty good summation. I'm impressed.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And I think Representative Bliss has a similar bill, not exact same similar bill in the House. I think they're going to see about 30 more versions of that bill in the House. Republicans are hot to trot on this, so something's going to happen. And to some extent, I know, if you look at some of the tweets, the Democrats are saying, hell no, we won't go type of thing. But if you sit down and talk to a few of them, they do agree that something needs to be done to speed up the count, and would go as far as to say, okay, if I'm going to lose 3 days on the back end, meaning I'm losing Saturday, Sunday, Monday on my drop off, then can we just load those 3 days to the front end? And frankly, that's a simple solution. That's a layup, and it's give me, if you would, if it solves the problem. But I think this is also going to come down to county recorders, and if they feel like they've got sort of every equipment and piece of equipment and human capital put into place to be able to deal with this. The fact of the matter is change is hard. The electorate is going to have a difficult time adjusting. So one of the components of this needs to be a huge PR project to educate voters so that they don't show up on Saturday and Sunday to go drop their early ballot off.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's important for Republicans not to say this is like the silver bullet and counting, because you do still have so many early ballots that are going to be dropped off even before the Friday deadline. So there's still going to be a delay. And so I'm always worried that we're going to say this will solve it, and then we're still going to be delayed, and the public is even more, feels even more like, okay, there's still something fishy going on. So I think, I do think this plan will speed it up, but it's not going to solve the entire issue, because in the state we allow early voting and people love it.
Yeah, and people do love it. And I think a big thing is setting those expectations, like whether it's an education campaign or not, because we do story after story every election cycle that says, look, it takes 10 to 13 days to count these votes. And every election cycle, we get emails from voters and stuff, and they're upset that it's taking this long. So I don't know what the solution is. I've heard some early pushback from some county recorders, officials who are concerned that if you stop taking early ballots on that Friday before the election day, then that's going to increase the lines on election day, that Tuesday, which creates a whole other problem because you don't want those visuals of those long lines of people snaking around the corner like we did in the 2016 presidential preference election that year that we saw. I think you saw backups of like almost a mile-long line and people waiting 5-6 hours to cast their vote. You wouldn't want that. I mean, what other issues you're hearing about that with elections that people want to deal with, unless this is the main one?
I think it's the main
definitely
one.
the big one. And then it's gonna, we're gonna have those stories. Look, we're married, right? And there's Meghan is going to wait until the last minute to cast her ballot, and I'm going to go drop it off on election day. And then we're going to have a big surprise when my ballot gets counted and she has to go into
I
curing.
always mail my name.
I know, I'm making an example.
Bullshit
Jeez.
over there. Sorry.
For the record, she was the first one. I didn't do it.
He made me.
But then I'm going to have to come home and be like, hey, honey, your ballot's in curing. You got 5 days to go down to the county recorder. And she's going to go, yeah, it's not that important. And so the electorate's going to have to figure. I'm using it as an example. Okay. So anyway, it's going to happen to a lot of people. And that adjustment, we need to get ahead of that curve. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the biggest problem with all of this change is that voters are going to have to understand that it's just do it when you get your ballot in that first week.
Well, but there's always an October surprise. Wait for that October surprise.
And do you get a sense that both parties could come together on this? And if they could, what could be the holdups on this from, what would be the holdups from getting bipartisan solution on this?
I mean, I think Democrats think that you're taking away, right, days of voting. Mm-hmm. And so I think the solution that Marcus was talking about moving it up 3 days, sort of solves that, issue. But also you do have people that, work or have jobs, do that, right? They like to do that, voting on the weekend. So you're still, right, are you disenfranchising voters by shutting off that ability on the weekend to go down there and, cast your ballot? But what are you sacrificing? And I think just like when we went from, election day only to mail-in ballot, it's a change, and people just need to get used to it. And I think voter confidence is probably more important in my mind, just to move forward, frankly.
And also, though, I mean, could Republicans then they don't need Democrats for this stuff with the majorities they've got. Could they just be sending stuff to Governor Hobbs that she may not like just to put her on record and make her look bad? We saw that, the past year or so. I mean, could you see it on this issue, and do you foresee this happening a lot in this coming legislative session?
Or send it to the ballot.
Are you claiming that there's politics at play here, Dennis?
I know. It's like
that's shocking.
Shocking. There's gambling going on in this casino.
And of course, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But remember, the governor's up in 2 years, so I think the next 2 years, this is her opportunity to sort of make her legacy, message herself. What is her legacy? What is her portrait of Arizona? What does she care about, right? So she's going to have to be a little bit different than the core Democratic caucus, who are in 70% Democratic safe districts and can sort of do what they want to do. But she's up against 2 years campaign cycle, and she's going to have to govern a little bit different. So they're going to have to adjust to that within the Democratic caucus. I think she's going to look for solutions, especially on one like this. And if she can find, a few Democrat county recorders from throughout the state that say, hey, Gov, we can live with this, but she's going to move forward on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's another kind of interesting discussion, like what we've seen recently, Governor Katie Hobbs, border hawk. At least she's trying to present herself that way now. What would you expect coming from her this year on the border? Because it seems to me she wants to be a lot more aggressive on this issue. She saw what happened in the polls the last month. She doesn't want to get caught up in that again. What can we expect coming from her and from and other lawmakers down there on the border this year?
I mean, I don't think you're going to see her. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think you're going to see her do anything in the state of the state on the border or lead sort of on the border issue. But I also don't know that she will do what like the Tucson mayor is doing or the city of Phoenix mayor is doing, right, on the ballot initiative that passed and just saying we're not going to, comply with it. I don't see her taking that stance, but I'm not sure she'll lead on it.
What do you think? What do you think?
They're gonna dress her in full fatigues, armor with an AR-15, and put her at the
That would
border.
look weird. I don't see that
face
happening.
camouflage.
She's gonna set up a ninth floor south, executive tower south.
I think she's gonna. She's clearly shown that she needs to pay attention to the issue, right?
Yeah.
Every politician has gotten a memo. Immigration's the number one issue, and has been and will continue to be. And so I think that although she won't make it the focal point, she's definitely going to work on it. I guess it's the best way. But she's going to play to her strengths, right? And to a certain extent, obviously, housing and the economy and inflation are big issues. Those were 2 and 3 behind there. Housing plays to her strength, and so I think she's probably going to want to try and focus on that. Inflation's a hard, almost impossible issue for a governor to deal with. It's really more a product of economics than it is state policy. And so that one's a little bit tougher to deal with. But I would look at issues that play off of inflation or the economy and try and use that to your strength.
I do think she's going to have to, in the last 2 years, she's just said, like, my job and role is to stop the crazy, right? I'm going to just be the veto governor. But if she wants to win again, right, in 2 years, she's going to have to start to try to move some of those things forward and be more than just the veto governor. And the thing that I would like to see her do on some key issues of hers is actually use the governor's office as a bully pulpit, which I don't think you've seen. I think you saw Governor Ducey do that, right, during his term, but you haven't seen that as much from Governor
Yeah, it was strange. We were, at least I was kind of expecting that a lot more last year because there would be these controversial bills as there is every year at the legislature, and the Republican bills being heard in committee. You never saw any protests outside. Like, her people weren't organized. And believe me, I mean, there's a lot of grassroots, but it's mixed in with enough AstroTurf out there that you can, you expect these kinds of things to happen. You didn't see a lot of that last year. And, the governor wasn't leading on some of those fights that some people I've talked to, even Democrats, that think she needs to have those fights here in the next 2 years.
I think she should have the fight she can win,
Yeah.
right? I think sometimes on the Democrat side of it, right, they're picking fights that just aren't winnable and frankly aren't even winnable with the electorate.
Yeah.
And so, I think, in Arizona, right, to have a Democrat governor, she cannot move to that sort of progressive left. And so, yes, I do think she has to use sort of her microphone and she has to pick the fights that matter, but she has to pick the fights that matter for Arizonans, right? Not just her political party. And that she's going to have to weave through that because the parties in general, Republican and Democrat, they're split. You have sort of 2 Republican parties and you have 2 Democrat parties. And she's trying to weave in the middle of that. And it's challenging. But she's the governor. So, I'm sure if she held a press conference, Dennis, she'd probably show up. So she's got to.
That's my job.
She's got to do a little more of those.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the old job description there. You got to follow. The governor calls a press conference. You go down there and you cover it. I want to wrap up with housing, though, because what can we expect? Is there anything substantive that the legislature can do to deal with housing, be it the high rental costs, be it home prices? Is there something that the legislature can even do out there? I mean, I think last year they were bragging about casita bills or a casita bill. And yeah, I've said on this podcast before, like, that doesn't do shit.
No, but if the low-income housing tax credit expires, so you need to reauthorize that. When people ask me, like, well, what is that? Why do you need it? Well, if you're building an apartment complex, right, it costs the same amount to build that apartment complex. But if you're going to have lower than market rate rent, then you do need to offset that with some sort of tax credit to build those, right? So that you can have just attainable workforce housing. That expires. So the legislature should be looking at that and trying to renew that, or we're going to have even further crisis. The Department of Housing is up for continuation, right? I hope that in this state we decide that that's an important agency. But you kind of saw what happened last year with agencies and sunsets and directors. So I think that's going to be a fight, even though it shouldn't be a fight. Well, I mean, it was a fight last year on everything. So, and then, I'm all about local control because I think that, local government is what touches the people the most. But at the same time, when you have communities just saying, like, I don't want those types of people to live in this community anymore, and that's what's going on in Arizona. And frankly, I mean, I've lived here since I was 8 months old. That is just not the Arizona that I grew up in. So that's sad to see that we don't want, elderly or veterans or, literally people who are teachers and firefighters be able to move into certain communities, and we're using zoning laws to make that happen. That is sad, and I really hope that the legislature uses their power to start to change that.
Yeah, I mean, because we've seen some some studies out there, reports that first responders, you got police, fire, like they can't afford to live in Phoenix. I mean, the people who we pay to protect our communities can't afford to live here. What can be done about that? Is there any political will to really go after, some of the causes of all this?
Is there a political will? Sure. Is there a political way? It's pretty difficult.
Yeah.
It's hard when you're dealing with sort of economics to enter into a government solution that solves every problem, right?
Yeah.
So, we're growing we're the fastest growing county in the fastest growing state in the nation. And so supply hasn't kept up with demand. Our population, to Megan's point about the elderly, I mean, we've been great at healthcare. And so we're living longer. And so our parents are living longer and they need somewhere to go. And those are senior living facilities. And guess what? We're not zoning them because nobody wants those in our backyard. But I think we'll be looking at some small stuff like, in business, speed kills, right? The faster you can get this done means the more profit. And so I think that we're going to be looking at, small changes that cities and towns and counties can do to speed up the zoning process to get those developments going faster and therefore being able to leapfrog into the next development. But, I say all this. We don't know what the next 6 months holds. The economy could fall out tomorrow, and housing prices, inflation goes away instantaneously, and housing prices drop like a rock. So, Merry Christmas. We'll find out what's coming.
We still need more.
We still need more.
Unless people are going to move from Arizona, we still need more housing. So.
That's a solution I'd like to look at. Did I say that out loud? I used my outside voice
He's
again.
so grumpy sometimes.
He is grumpy.
How can you be grumpy in that shirt, Marcus?
I just get on the roads and start driving around.
Well, I think we got to wrap it up there. I think we hit the 30-minute mark here. We're close to it. So I want to end with this. Favorite Christmas movie?
Die Hard.
I knew you were going to do that. I so knew you were going to do that.
It is a Christmas movie.
Okay. Yeah.
The Year Without a Santa Claus. The best claymation ever put together. Heat Miser, Freeze
He
Miser.
does really like that
Everybody
movie.
loves that
He makes
one.
us watch it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I didn't know you needed to out me that much. Mr. Heat Miser.
Right.
Everybody remembers it.
You're not a singer, huh?
No.
Wow. That was... I think we got our cold open on that one.
It's better than the other one.
Hey, I want to thank you two for taking some time by stop by and give us your thoughts on what to expect with the unexpected legislature. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the second half of the Politics Unplugged podcast. And as always, producer extraordinaire, Colin Stan.
Always a pleasure.
Colin, before we get started on anything, what's your favorite Christmas movie?
I'm not that big a Christmas movie guy, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, I'll go Die Hard, I guess, even though I don't really think of it as a Christmas movie.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite's, Trading Places. Eddie Murphy,
Right.
Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing
If
says Christmas more to me than watching Dan Aykroyd gnaw on a piece of smoked salmon through that dirty Santa beard.
Yeah. All right. That's good. I mean, if we're including TV specials, the Charlie Brown Christmas special is my favorite.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get into the our list of things,
Yeah.
we've got some fun
We
stuff
haven't done
here.
any music debates for a while, so we'll get back to that in a second.
Yeah. What did you notice? What stood out for you politically this week?
The one thing I found amusing, aggravating, I don't know. Did you see Dinesh D'Souza on Twitter?
I did not.
His movie 2000 Mules.
Mm-hmm.
He tweeted out, "Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, that was all bullshit. Sorry,
Yeah.
that was all totally fake. Sorry,
That caused a lot
my
of
bad.
problems.
Yes, it did.
That fueled a lot
a
of
lot
anger.
of death threats.
A lot of
death threats came out of that ridiculous thing. That now that Trump's back in office, he went, yeah, sorry, that was all made up. My bad. Sorry.
That fueled a lot of anger and angst among people who some people believed that stuff, or
Yeah.
a lot more than some.
Yeah.
And for him to just walk that back was
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we are now with the election denialism. It's, oh, yeah, no, that was bullshit. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's look forward.
For me, the most interesting thing I worked on this week was that story about a drug distributor that is, a few years ago agreed to be part of this nationwide settlement to, they were accused of fueling the opioid epidemic. It's killed
Yes.
like over 10,000 people in
Yes.
Arizona. And they agreed to pay into this pot of money. And at the same time they're paying into it, they're actually getting more money out of that pot of money than they're paying into it here in Arizona. I thought that was fascinating. And, the governor's response was, well, there's not much we can do.
Which is not a great answer. Yeah.
It's just it's a bad look. I mean, there's some arguments. There's like, well, this is a big distributor. They buy pharmaceuticals in bulk, and we can pass the savings on to the customers. And if we were to end these contracts with this company, then it would increase costs for everyday Arizonans. And okay, I get that, but look how bad this is.
Yeah.
They're getting paid directly out of the same pot of money that they're paying into for their role in this lethal opioid epidemic.
Yes. It's absurd. And let me just say, from the events of this week and the public reaction to events of this week,
Yeah.
I'm not sure the healthcare complex is held in very high esteem by the American public right now.
That's a weird story.
That's a
man.
weird story.
I mean, a guy is shot dead in cold blood, Manhattan,
Yeah.
and man, there's just not a lot of sympathy for the guy.
None. You're not seeing any out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, damn.
Yeah.
I mean, I get
People-
there's anger with the healthcare industry and whatnot, but damn, some of the comments, I don't even want to repeat some of the stuff I've seen.
My favorite news tidbit to come out of this so far is that the guy was rushed to a hospital after the shooting that was out of network because United Healthcare had dropped them earlier this year.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Irony.
Yeah. Yeah. No, people do not enjoy dealing with the healthcare system in this country, and one that is designed to screw them.
Yeah. And other than that, I thought the conversation with the Dell'Artinos was pretty informative. One of my takeaways is it doesn't look like much is going to get done on housing this coming year.
No, there's just no appetite to take on the real issues with housing and why it's become so hard to afford anything.
Yeah, and
there's
we've
just
done-
no one who wants to tackle that.
I know the investigative team, which you're kind of a part of here, has done some really good reporting on what's driving some of the costs and whatnot. You've got investors, Airbnbs, these kinds of things, and I doubt anything that addresses those issues gets done. And
No.
and to be fair, from a policy perspective, it can get kind of tricky tackling some of that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you don't try.
Yeah. No, I get that dealing with investors and that's not going to be a really easy fix.
No.
It's not as easy a fix as saying, hey, you can put a casita in your backyard.
And then say, hey, we've done something. It still
Yes.
chaps my ass.
I know.
Because you're like,
There are-
it's not going to do anything.
It's really easy to take the steps that aren't going to do anything.
yeah.
It's hard to take the steps that'll actually improve it. And the stuff that, from the White House, the plan, at least from the campaign, was immigration will fix it, which it will
Won't.
have virtually nothing to do with the housing situation. And we're going to build on national lands, which awesome if someone wants to, commute from outside Page to their job in
Well,
Phoenix.
good luck with that.
That'll be awesome.
Marcus just said speed kills. Yeah, good luck if you want to drill more on federal lands. That's going to be locked up in lawsuits.
Yeah, and the drill, that was their other big thing.
Drill, baby, drill.
baby, drill, which again has jack shit to do with anything.
Kind of nonsensical.
Yes.
What's your housing plan? Drill, baby, drill. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
That's not even
Yeah.
related.
Biden was drilling more than anyone had before, right?
Well,
Somehow that didn't fix housing.
yeah. The thing is about the quick look back on the election. You're just again reminded of a lot of things. You get all these folks, these pundits on all these various different shows on the left, the right, and they're paid to be interesting. They're not paid
Yeah.
to be right.
Right.
They're paid to be interesting, and some of the theories about things is interesting, and it's good fodder for conversation. Again, I go back to the election and terrible environment for the incumbent to run in, and also to national elections, and to a certain extent, even the big statewide elections, is all about how the candidate makes the voter feel,
Yeah.
more than just the issues itself.
Yeah.
How does that person make you feel?
Yes.
And I think Donald Trump, for all his faults or whether you think he's great or not, did a better job of making voters feel like he's going to do something for them.
Yeah.
In this.
Which is odd considering he referred to the U.S. as the world's garbage can.
I'm telling you.
I get it.
know.
I'm not. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah.
It's. I don't necessarily get it, but yes,
Because
you're
we
right.
were talking about policy and things that don't mean anything. Like, yeah, I get it. But it's also how'd that person make you feel?
Yeah.
And they feel like they wanted some guy who's not going to be typical, and he's going to be a fighter for them, and fired them up in that way. I didn't mean to get off on this tangent, but we kind of got there. Just wanted to kind of make that comment. Maybe wrong on this, but I think that's one of the basics of politics. And a lot of times you go back to the basics to explain things like that.
Yeah.
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 Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Man, breaking down the election is.
Oh, God, I'm so over it. That was so last month.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that again.
Have you ever looked forward to the legislative session more?
No, I am so looking forward to.
Please don't make me talk about this anymore.
No, I know, and I feel, and I've talked to you a little bit about it. I feel myself, media writ large. I think we spend so much time covering horse race stuff and not enough time really focusing on issues.
Yeah.
Doing more in-depth pieces explaining, because a lot of times politicians of all stripes have very simple solutions for complex problems, and sometimes you just got to realize it's a fucking complex problem we're trying to. Like when you're dealing with housing. Yeah, we know what's driving this, and it's a lot of investors and stuff like that are doing it.
Yeah.
But how do you stop it? And when you get into that discussion, you see how complicated it can be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an easy fix.
No,
but
and I
if
think
someone could take a shot, that'd be great.
But if there's enough pressure, you bet your ass these politicians will be moving heaven and earth to try to get that done.
Yeah.
But
By the way, do you notice all the policy coverage on, all the national stories on like, hey, did you realize that Trump's policies will make inflation worse? And here's why. All this started the day after the election. All right, I'll leave that alone.
I know. We're implicating ourselves too.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. We could have done a better job.
Yeah. So I know
I'll try and remember this in 4 years.
All right. Well, anyway, let's try the hard pivot now.
The hard
to
pivot.
something fun.
Yeah.
Something fun.
We haven't done it in a while, but we always love complaining about lists, musical lists. Usually, and Rolling Stone is the one that always gives you the
shittiest list.
Yeah, they love the lists over at Rolling Stone. This was a Rolling Stone list.
Yeah.
The most disappointing, the top 50 disappointing albums of all time.
Oh, good God.
Disappointing for a number of reasons, some of which on their list I don't get. And it's not a terrible list. The list is okay.
Yeah.
So we'll have our own list in a second, but let's go through some of the ones on theirs. Mm-hmm. Number 1, they had John Lennon, Sometime in New York. Well, whatever. I've never heard it. I don't care that much about John Lennon's solo career. I guess it was sort of very topical and just generally not very good from what Rolling Stone had to say.
It's not a terrible
I would read
record.
what they are saying, but their website is so utterly horrendous and unreadable that I'm reading it off someone else's list that they copied and pasted.
Oh, yeah.
Number 2, Rolling Stones, their Satanic Majesty's Request. Stones go psychedelic with mixed results. She's Like a Rainbow is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bob Dylan's Self-Portrait. Yeah, the Self-Portrait sucks. Number 4, David Bowie, Tonight. We might go into more detail on that in a minute. Number 5.
That's what we call foreshadowing.
Yeah. Guns N' Roses, Chinese Democracy.
They might go into detail.
All right, we might have more on that in a second. Bruce Springsteen, Human Touch. Yeah, that sucked.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, put out.
That's like right
put
after
out
Born in the
2
USA, right?
It was after Tunnel of Love.
Okay.
And then this was without the E Street Band. He put out 2 records like on back-to-back weeks. Human Touch and a Lucky Town. Lucky Town was probably the better of the 2. They both sucked.
I mean, but yeah, his career is kind of, because after that massive success in the mid-'80s, it's kind of like there was this gradual decline after.
Yeah.
And then he puts out Ghost of Tom Jones, I think, in
Tom Joad,
Tom Joad in the mid-'90s, and that record is amazing. It's like one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen records. Anyway, go on.
Probably a bit in the minority on that one.
Oh, it's great. I love it. I love it. Hey, I'll stand by myself, just like you hung me out to dry on the Star Wars.
You don't love Star Wars? Yeah, no, that was fun.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
I'm not a big Star Wars guy. Number 7, Beach Boys, Smiley Smile. Sure. Number 8, Stevie Wonder, Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. I mean, that came off the back end of one of the greatest runs in music history, and it was songs about plants. Number 9, Yes, Tales from Topographic Oceans. I will say I'm physically incapable of being disappointed by a Yes album.
I was just going to say, I don't think there's a Yes album. I mean, Roundabout's kind of an okay song.
Yeah. No, not
like
not,
the bass solo in that record's kind of, in that song, kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah,
not my lane. Number 10, Michael Jackson, Invincible. It wasn't as big as the stuff before it. I don't care. I'll jump through some of this. Number 11, I thought was funny. Lou Reed album. This is the man who put out Metal Machine music, which was just noise.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The bar for being disappointed in Lou Reed seems tricky. Neil Young's Hawks and Doves is number 14. I thought this was funny. Duran Duran, Thank You at 18. It's a covers album. It's all they do, like Watching the Detectives by Elvis Costello. They do 911 as a Joke by Public Enemy. It's hard to say it's disappointing because if you look at the song list and realize this is Duran Duran doing Public Enemy, and they also do Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, it is every bit as shitty as you think that would be.
Yeah.
So disappointing, I don't know. How disappointed can one possibly be?
Did you have
in Duran Duran
Did you have
doing
your
Public
hopes up?
Enemy?
Like, oh man, they're gonna kill it on this Public Enemy remake.
No, it's awful.
Yeah.
Number 21, The Stone Roses' Second Coming. I'm just surprised that wasn't higher because the second Stone Roses album is always held up as one of the great failures. The great, terrible, terrible second albums after a great first album. Number 2, Bob Dylan and the Dead. I don't know that anyone had high hopes for that.
I think context. I think when a list like this is kind of lacks context.
Yeah.
Because why with John Lennon on the top, it's probably disappointing. May have been disappointing, really disappointing at the time that record came out, because everybody's expecting. You expect everything from John Lennon to be amazing.
Yeah.
And
he knocked that out of us pretty quickly. once the Beatles ended.
He had a few good songs in his solo career.
He did. Yeah. The Red Hot Chili Peppers' One Hot Minute was at 30. I was surprised for that one. I don't know. I thought it was better than Blood Sugar Sex Magic, but I'm at the.
That was a big disappointment for you. I don't know if that.
I hated that record.
Did that make your list?
It didn't, but
Okay.
I thought heartily about it. I was a big Chili Peppers guy in the early years. I saw them 6 times back in the 80s. I've seen them 6 times. I haven't seen them since '89.
Wow.
That album came out, and I just thought it was awful. And of course, it's the one that broke them. They've been huge ever since.
Yeah, no. I thought I always thought Mother's Milk was my favorite record of theirs.
Yeah, I think that was terrific. And then this one came afterwards. I mean, it's funny to me seeing them playing they'll play SoFi Stadium or they'll Glendale Stadium. And I saw them play a beer garden at my college.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them at the Golden Bear in Huntington Beach, which is a pretty tiny club. I saw them play in really, really, really small places, and now they're playing football stadiums. It's bizarre to me. Another one that's one of the classic failure records, Peter Frampton's I'm In You. At number 32, that's after Frampton Comes Alive. And if you were alive in the 70s, every man, woman, and child alive in the 70s was issued a copy of Frampton Comes Alive.
Yeah, no,
I think.
my father had a copy of that, yes.
And
government issue, I believe.
Yes. And I'm In You was the follow-up, and it's excruciating. It's really bad.
Yeah, even the title is pretty excruciating.
It's pretty bad. All right, the one other thing on this list that stood out to me just because it really pissed me off, number 42, U2 Songs of Innocence. That's the one that was sent out to people's iPhones.
Oh, okay.
It's a great record. It's a great record. It's a really, really good U2 record. It's not disappointing. It's just that people on social media all did the, oh my God, they put a record on my phone thing. And it's not disappointing. And even the Rolling Stone write-up on it, on this list said, look, it's not that it's a bad record. It's that, well, they put it on phones. Like that's some goddamn crime.
Then what was the criteria?
I don't know.
I
don't know.
I don't remember
I
seeing
never
it.
figured out what the criteria, how this fit any criteria for disappointing.
Just throwing
Because
shit
they said it was a good record. It's just that I don't know. So we've got our own lists.
All right.
Let me pull mine up. You want to go first or me?
While I'm pulling up, you can go.
All right. Number 1 for me, David Bowie's Tonight, which I think is number 4 on the Rolling Stone list. It's the one that came after Let's Dance, which was like the big. Let's Dance is far from Bowie's best record, but it was like the big commercial mainstream breakthrough. And there's some really good stuff on it. Mm-hmm. He did a big stadium tour off of that, and then he did Tonight, which I think the single from that was Blue Jean, and had a cover of God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. And it's awful. It's just a bad, lifeless. He clearly was utterly out of ideas and was not in a great place. It's a terrible record. Yeah. Fishbone, Chim Chim's Badass Revenge, which I always think of as being like their 3rd or 4th record. It's actually, I think, their 6th.
Yeah.
It's awful. And the best songwriters in the band left before this one came out. And so the guys who wrote all the really smart, good stuff from their early years, and some of it was really good. I mean, Fishbone remains the best live act I've ever seen back in that, in the mid-'80s. Fishbone was unbeatable.
Yeah, and I saw them back in the early days, and if the energy that came off that stage and just the chaos up there in the energy from the crowd, it was just, they were amazing.
Yes. I think I've seen Fishbone like 18 times.
Wow.
Almost all of them back in that era. I saw them a few years ago. But anyway, they went from these really smart, good songs they were doing to doing songs called Monkey Dick. That's on Chim Chim's Badass Revenge. The only good song on Chim Chim's Badass Revenge is a song called Alcoholic that had been in their live show since before they ever put out a record. And it wasn't good enough to make it on the first 5 records that they put out, but it was certainly good enough to be the best thing on Chim Chim's Badass Revenge. Number 3, Elvis Costello, Goodbye Cruel World. In the liner, when it was reissued and Elvis did the liner notes for it, the opening line of the liner notes was, "Congratulations, you've just purchased our worst album." Oh. To be fair, he's put out far worse since then.
Yeah,
but
he's as much as I loved his records, man, he has put out some real bombs.
Yeah, I love Elvis. Some of his later stuff is pretty good. His record with Burt Bacharach was
terrific.
Yes, he did
When
a
I
great
Was Cruel.
one. Yes, that was very good. He did one with Alan Toussaint, The River in Reverse, after Katrina, that was very good. He did one with The Roots that was kind of interesting. I wouldn't say it was great, but it was better than like the sort of rehashed Americana he was doing. Anyway, Goodbye Cruel World was just bad. He was going through a divorce. It's all really slow, depressing stuff, except it was produced by the same guys who did Punch the Clock, his like really poppy one that came before it, like the most 80s producers in the world.
It's funny how like divorce or bad breakups affect artists and music. Either the next record is amazing or it's the worst goddamn
terrible
thing.
Yeah. And some of them lyrically are okay, but musically it's just it's bad. All right. Number 4, Talking Heads, Little Creatures. I love Talking Heads. We've talked about this before.
Well, I mean,
one of the best American
you're
bands
going to
of
have
all
some
time.
of your favorite bands on this list because
Yes.
it's the most disappointing for us.
Yes. And their whole run all the way through Speaking in Tongues was brilliant. And then the Speaking in Tongues tour was in the movie Stop Making Sense, which is amazing. They were incredible up until that point. And then Little Creatures is like this shitty little children's record.
Yeah.
It's all basic and the songwriting's terrible and everything about it's awful. And then number 5, Little Village by Little Village. And I realize this requires explanation. Little Village was sort of a super group. The album came out in like 91. And Little Village consisted of John Hyatt, Ry Cooder, Nick Lowe, and Jim Keltner.
That's a hell of a lineup.
Yes. They, in like 4 years earlier, that was the band for John Hyatt's record Bring the Family, which is an absolutely great record. It's a phenomenal band. They were all on hiatus from various stuff. So they said, hey, why don't we do a record? And the 4 guys are brilliant and the record sucks. And like Nick Lowe said afterwards, yeah, Little Village was a lot of fun. It's too bad the album was terrible. He said he thought the label probably gave them too much time to do it.
Yeah, you get that kind of talent into a room, this ego's going to take over.
And I think they just had a shortage of ideas.
Yeah.
More than anything. There's one great song on it. There's a John Hyatt song called Don't Think About Her When You're Trying to Drive, which is terrific. And the rest of it is just instantly forgettable. They did a tour and then all went their merry ways again.
Wow.
All right, that's my 5.
All right. What do I got going on here? I'll start at 5.
Okay.
I'm going to start with The Descendants and their record Enjoy. This is like one of their mid '80s records, and this came after Milo Goes to College. Now, I want to say this: like Descendants, one of my all-time favorite bands. Like no qualifiers, not all-time favorite punk rock band or one of my all-time favorite. I love this band to death. I once in a moment of bad decision making, once told my then wife, now ex-wife, to be quiet because the Descendants came on the radio. I shushed her. I deserved what I got after that.
Which was a divorce.
Maybe not the divorce right after that. It was a little while later.
Okay.
It was not a. It
didn't go over
It wasn't
well.
a warm evening, man.
No.
This is how much I love Descendants, right?
Right.
But like this movie, this album came after, like, again, Milo Goes to College is like just an iconic, epic record, just classics on that. And I put a few notes on here just so I to remind myself. And the note on this is, like, look, there's still a couple of really solid pop songs on there that I love, like "Cheer Me Up" is a great song. There's "Sour Grapes," great songs on that record. But other than that, I wrote "Kind of Cool If You Like Farts."
All right.
Because like
So going for the Green Day crowd?
yeah, they're literally farting into a microphone at some point, singing about farts. The album cover
Oh God.
is of toilet paper on a roll. I mean, if they're kind of warning you going into it, and it's like,
Yeah.
and they're always a silly kind of juvenile band back, and all that. So I get what you're trying to do, but like this was just too far. And then there was some metal elements that crept in here. Now, I liked some metal, but I don't want that with keep your metal out of my Descendants. Like, don't California my Arizona, don't metal up my Descendants kind of thing. So that was just personally like just really, really disappointing for me. And again, let's keep reminding you, these are all lists like personally disappointed for us.
Yeah.
Like I feel like Rolling Stone is trying to be the definitive arbiter of what was disappointing, even though they just didn't provide any metric or explanation for much of this stuff. So we'll go up to 4, and this is where we get to Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy. Now, here's the thing. I really can't talk too in-depth about this record because I listened to it once, and I didn't need to listen to it again.
No, I know. I'm in the same spot. I got it like right when it came out, heard it once, and went, yeah, okay.
Yes. So I went back and listened to a little bit of it the other night, and I got to tell you, it's still garbage. I actually pulled up a positive review. This is from a positive review in the LA Times. Jesus. And they call it a test for contemporary ears and a cyborgian blend of pop expressiveness, traditional rock bravado, and Brian Wilson-style beautiful weirdness. That's a positive review.
Yeah.
That's a reason not to buy this, listen to that record.
And it's a Guns N' Roses record. That's not what I want.
And it took 10 goddamn years to
I think
make.
it took 16.
Oh, my God.
I believe it took 16. It was,
What was the band that tried to call their record Chinese?
The Offspring announced they were going to call their next record Chinese Democracy since it was still available. Because Axl had been announced, he'd been talking about it and had the title for like literally 16 years, and they kept going through guitarists. At one point, Buckethead was their guitarist.
That's right.
They kept cycling through guys, and we kept hearing that it might be close. No, it's not close.
Yeah, no, they went through a lot of members.
Yeah,
I wanted to joke that I checked the Wikipedia page and found out that I was a member for a month.
It might have been. It might have been. What's funny, too, with Guns N' Roses is I considered that for the list, but I also considered the record before it for the list because it's easy to forget about the Spaghetti Incident. Oh. Their cover or their album of, like, punk covers where they did, like, a Fear cover that's just awful.
Fear is...
Iggy and the Stooges cover that's not great. It was a bad record, but after 16 years of waiting, Chinese Democracy did not really.
There was no way that wasn't going to disappoint.
No, no.
No way. And it deserves to be on every disappointed list.
Yeah.
And this one I put on because I literally was disappointed on this, and partly just because I wanted to be an asshole. Number 3 is Pearl Jam's 10.
Yeah.
How does a debut record make it on your most disappointing, you might ask?
Yes. So tell me, Dennis, how does a band's debut record make your most disappointing list?
So, like, I was really into some of the early sub-pop bands. And so, like, the idea of, like, a bunch of great bands being in Seattle and from that area wasn't, like, really shocking to me, as it apparently shocked the world when Nirvana broke, right?
Yeah.
So
we'd already had Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, the Melvins.
The Melvins. And I was really into bands like Mudhoney.
Yeah.
The band called Tad.
Tad, yes.
And
Screaming Trees were around.
Screaming Trees were great. Even some Mother Love Bone stuff was pretty decent.
Yes. Great band.
Yeah.
That was a forerunner to Pearl Jam. Some of the same members.
So and so again, I knew that they were starting this new band. We heard about, and then all this talks. Oh, it came out. It's great, and you get it, and it's just a guy mumbling into a microphone, and it doesn't rock. Where does it rock? He's like singing about weird people, like dudes like shooting up classrooms and like. I don't even want to get into some of the lyrics, about the woman walking into the room, I don't even
Alive, yeah.
Yeah, Alive.
Alive is one of those cases where you don't necessarily need the songwriter to explain what it's about.
No, you don't want it.
You don't want it with that one.
You do not want that.
If you're not paying attention, it's kind of uplifting.
Yeah.
Go ahead and leave it that way.
If you're paying attention, it's not uplifting. It's creepy and weird.
And you hear it, you're kind of like, God, this kind of sounds like, and then you hear from Eddie and like, no, that's exactly what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's just, so I was like, wow, man. And I've just never been really that big of a fan. And just for about a year there when that album was big, I just had to grin and bear it everywhere you went. Oh, aren't they great?
Yeah.
Have you heard of Temple of Dog? It's like, no, it's more of it. I grow hungry.
Yeah. See, I'm more of I like 10 more than you do. But it seems like every album after that was just a little less.
10, 9, 8.
Yes. and I was living in the Northwest when it came out. Yeah. I remember going to Seattle and seeing flyers everywhere for a band called Mookie Blaylock and sort of laughing that there was a band called Mookie Blaylock.
Yeah, because they're big basketball
fans. Yeah. And that was Pearl Jam. They had to change the name.
I wonder if Mookie would have sued had they kept their name.
I think they foresaw an issue there. I believe there were legal reasons why they changed it.
Can we get Mookie on the show next week?
We can try. I don't know what he's doing.
One of the great names in NBA in college. Didn't he play for UNLV or?
Sounds right. And I think he might have been with the Hawks.
Oklahoma or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I forget.
Anyway, number 2.
By the way, my favorite college basketball name of that era, Eldridge Rakasner. He played at Washington.
That's awesome.
I always thought that was a great name.
Awesome. Number 2 on the list is the Clash's Sandinista or Sandinista.
Yeah, it's got the exclamation point on the
end. And we were kind of talking about this. It's a 3-record or 3-disc thing. I think I compared it to the Infinite Jest of punk rock records.
Yes.
And if you're familiar with Infinite Jest or not, it's a very thick book.
Yeah, very, very thick and impenetrable, which Sandinista is right up there with that. Yeah.
So I pulled a quote from Infinite Jest that I think applies. They called that book a vast encyclopedic compendium of whatever seems to cross Wallace's mind. And I'm like, it's kind of Sandinista for the Clash. Like, just whatever bullshit idea, we're going to put it on here.
I've always sort of written that off as, boy, if they culled it down to a 1-record set instead of a 3-record, it would be pretty good. And then I went back and really looked at it and went, okay, 5-song EP?
Yeah, 5-song EP. But we were joking too. We were talking about this last week about just disappointing records, and we talked a little bit about this. If you weren't old enough to understand cassette tapes, and I remember I got this on a cassette, the double, triple cassette, to fast forward and rewind on something like this was so aggravating.
Yeah. You had to try and guess how far you had to go in to get to the song you wanted to get to, and you never hit it right at the top because it was just a crapshoot. And on Sandinista, if you wanted to get to a good song, it was about 9 or 10 songs in.
just a lot of waiting, man.
Yes. It's I mean you're a huge Clash fan.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Clash fan. Love the Clash. It's a little disappointing that I was prepared to make an argument for any of their last 3 records being the most disappointing.
I know. Well,
they're terrible.
But the one thing Sandinista
Yeah.
has going for it is making it one of the worst or the worst is the amount of badness.
Yeah, it's 3 records, a 3-record set of like bad reggae dub stuff that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
And you know, it's got Somebody Got Murdered's on there.
Mm-hmm.
Police on My Back is on there. Magnificent Seven is on there. Charlie Don't Surf. You throw those on an EP.
It's
and
a
it's
classic.
terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the other 30 songs that are the issue.
And this came after their debut record, The Clash. It came
Yeah.
after Giving Them Enough Rope and the epic London Calling.
London Calling, which tops some people's greatest rock albums of all time.
And then you just put this turd out.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's just like you're at that pinnacle. I have no idea. I just wonder if anybody could talk to them at that point.
I don't know.
You know, because like there's that saying with writers, like even Hemingway needed an editor, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, even a great band's like, no, you don't need 20 of these songs.
Yeah.
You should put out an EP. You put out
Yes.
those 4 or 5 songs on a single or an EP. That's one of the classics,
Yes.
of all time.
Yeah. No, I can't even imagine what the record label thought when they got handed this just monstrous, unlistenable thing.
Well, and the thing is, and I was looking it up too, and on Wikipedia, and it said like it was when it came out Sandinista. God, they have a lot in common with Jeb Bush. Remember Jeb? Jeb.
Yeah.
But it was trashed in London, in England.
Yeah.
But it was praised in the States.
Yeah.
And like the only reason it had to have been praised in the States is because they probably thought, I don't understand this, so it must be deep.
Yeah. Yeah. And no, it's just not very good.
No, it's just not good.
It's
just not good.
Reggae-based noodling around with no purpose. And I love reggae.
Too
but
much
this is
time.
Bad reggae.
Too much time.
Bad
too
reggae.
Much, too much money.
And they followed it up with the bad combat rock.
Oh,
Two
God.
good. I like the 2 hit singles from it.
Yeah.
The rest of it's awful.
No.
And then the last one was Cut the Crap. And to give some idea of how good Cut the Crap is, I have a CD box set called The Complete Clash. It is The Complete Clash. It doesn't include it doesn't include Cut the Crap because they completely disowned it.
It's like some people, like fans of The Godfather, right? The Godfather 3 just doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? There wasn't a Godfather.
Better film than it gets credit for, which is not to call it good.
No.
But it's better than it gets credit for.
There's a couple of lines out of that movie.
Yeah.
That's a different discussion.
Yes.
But anyway, and then my all-time personal disappointment was Metallica's "And Justice for All."
Okay.
So before I moved, my dad moved us out here from Iowa. I was really big into, thrash metal, Metallica, Slayer, and all this stuff. And Master of Puppets was just, to me, like the pinnacle, the apex of thrash music. It was just a great, great, great record.
Yeah.
And moved out here. Spent a torturous summer by myself out here. Moved from Iowa in 110-degree heat days.
Yeah.
Going, what the hell did my dad? Well, why is my dad doing this to me?
Yes.
And waited forever for this record to come out. In the meantime, I'm just on my own, kind of just also discovering more punk rock and kind of getting my tastes are getting more and more into that. And then this finally comes out, right? They've got the new bass player because Cliff Burton had died the year before, and it just was so overproduced, and the drums sounded like he was hitting paper.
Yeah.
It was just such a weak, hollow sound compared to the prior records that it was just like, to me, it was like almost unlistenable.
Yeah.
And I see on like Spotify where there's a lot of remastered, so I don't know if they've made it better. But I remember just being so thoroughly disappointed. And then the single that came off that one,
Yeah.
I also did a video on that, even though they said they would never do a video.
It was
And
dark.
It was dark and was based on a book. And again, there was this like weird trend back then with the like metal bands like Anthrax would just write songs about the book they read.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want a book report, motherfucker. I want
Yeah.
Yeah, sing
Yes.
about whatever, but don't just give me a book report, man.
Yeah. I get that.
I mean, I think Anthrax put out a record, like half the songs were about Stephen King novels.
At least Metallica went a little more highbrow.
They went with the literature.
Yeah, and it's funny. Metallica is another one where legendary band, but a long list of candidates for most disappointing.
Well, I mean, they've not put out anything good, in my opinion, since then. I mean, if you look at lists of bad records, like Saint Anger.
I was going to say, when you see comments on the Rolling Stone list, there are a lot of people going, "The hell's Saint Anger?" No one arguing for Lulu. I guess no one had their hopes high enough to be disappointed by Lulu, the Metallica album with Lou Reed.
Yeah, good Lord. I mean, I'm not at the risk of starting another list, but like maybe all-time worst rock star ever. The drummer for Metallica's got to be on there, Lars Ulrich.
Yeah.
I mean, they did a
Not a beloved figure.
No, did a documentary. Well, A, he's a shitty drummer. And B, like he was in their documentary, Some Kind of Monster, complaining that his this piece of art he was selling only sold for $4 million. I'm like, oh, go fuck yourself.
Rock and roll, Lars.
Like rock and roll, buddy.
I hope your.
I mean, nothing says rock and roll.
I hope your Napster lawsuit helps you make up some of the lost money from your $1 million art collection.
Like, what'd you do after you sold your artwork for $4 million? Go trash a hotel to keep your rock and roll cred?
He's one of those rare guys that's like universally disliked even by fans.
Yeah, I don't even think Metallica fans really care for the guy that much.
No.
I mean, he grew up wanting to be a tennis player. He wanted to be Bjorn Borg before he wanted to be Neil Peart. Bjorn Borg. Or whatever.
I believe that's our first Bjorn Borg reference on the pod.
How's that even possible?
I don't know.
Anyway, I guess Jesus. I guess we're testing how long people will listen to this stuff. Look at that.
Yeah. All right.
We should probably scatterboo out of here.
Yeah.
Any quick predictions that will be dated by the time this drops on the ASU Iowa State?
I'll take ASU. I don't know.
I think I told you my headline. Did I tell you my headline?
Yeah, I believe you did.
It was just like, Iowa State gets bombed on Pearl Harbor Day by ASU.
Yeah. No, tasteful choice, Dennis.
Yeah, I know. We'll see. If people get upset about that, we'll find out they've been listening.
Yeah. That'll be a bonus. All right. Have a good week.
You too, man.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.